Good afternoon. I am Matthew Schneider, the United States Attorney for the Eastern District of Michigan, and it is a privilege to have Attorney General Barr with us here today. He and I welcome all of our federal, state, and local law enforcement partners who have also joined us. I am pleased to announce that Attorney General Barr has brought good news to Michigan. The United States Department of Justice is dedicated to supporting Michigan's men and women of law enforcement. The officers and agents here literally put their lives on the line each and every day to protect the people of our great state. The fact that Attorney General Barr has personally come to Detroit to announce this exciting initiative speaks volumes about his strong desire to keep Michigan a safe place to live and to work. In fact, it is unprecedented to have the Attorney General joining together outside of Washington with the heads of the FBI, ATF, DEA, and U.S. Marshals for such an announcement. Now, we all know that Detroit has significant violent crime challenges. However, we also know that this city has made remarkable progress fighting violent crimes in the last few years. That's because we have excellent prosecutors, such as Wayne County Prosecutor Kim Worthy. And this city has become much safer since the day James Craig became our chief of police. Because of the unwavering commitment of Chief Craig and the men and women of the Detroit Police Department, violent crime rates here continue to go down. And we're extremely thankful to Chief Craig and his team for making our region a better and safer place. Again, thank you for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, the Attorney General of the United States, William P. Barr.
Thank you, Matthew. We're here to announce this afternoon a major law enforcement initiative designed to surge federal, state, and local resources into cities where violent crime rates still are higher than the national average. We're calling it Operation Relentless Pursuit, and it's a two-pronged attack on violent crime. First, we're going to be increasing federal agents, analysts, and equipment into initially a group of 7 cities throughout the country. And second, we're going to provide substantial resources to the state and local law enforcement that will have a long-term and lasting effect on the capacity of those agencies to combat violent crime. Now, since the beginning of this administration, violent crime rates across the country, on average, have dropped. From 2000, and that was after an increase that had occurred between 2014 and 2016. But we've now seen in the last couple of years a decrease nationwide of about 4%. Here in Detroit, under the leadership of Chief Craig, there have been continuous progress since he arrived, I think, 7 years ago. And in the last year, there were significant drops in violent crime rates, robbery, aggravated assault, all in Detroit. The chief and his officers, as well as the other law enforcement partners in this area, are working hard to continue this effort. To address the problem of violent crime levels in some of our major cities, we are deploying these resources under Relentless Pursuit to 7 cities. Detroit, which still unfortunately has the highest violent crime and aggravated assault rate in the country. Memphis, which is the second most violent city in the country with a violent crime rate 5 times the national average. Baltimore, the robbery capital of the United States, with the second highest murder rate in the United States. Kansas City is in one of the top 5 most dangerous cities with a murder rate nearly 5 times the national average. Cleveland is the 6th most violent city with a murder rate 4.5 times the national average. Milwaukee the seventh most violent city with a violent crime rate 4 times the national average, and Albuquerque with a violent crime rate that is 3.7 times the national average, an aggravated assault 4 times the national average. Now, we selected these cities based on a number of factors. Obviously, the level of violent crime, but we also assessed our local partners. Very important to us is whether we had local partners that were effective and working well with our joint task forces. And so we assessed the police forces, the sheriffs, and as well as the district attorneys. And based on that matrix, we selected these cities. Demonstrating the level of our commitment today, I am joined by the heads of the 4 premier law enforcement agencies of the federal government, and we rarely get together in Washington, but I think this is the first time people remember us getting together all together outside of Washington. The deputies of the United States Marshal Service, who are represented by the director of the Marshal Service here, are our fugitive hunters. They're America's fugitive hunters, and they will target wanted violent criminals and gang members who terrorize our communities. The FBI, with Director Wray here, will, through their Safe Street task forces and their other efforts, conduct long-term and proactive investigations of sophisticated and violent criminal enterprises, including gangs and other criminal organizations. And ATF enforces our nation's gun laws. They have a unique capability to use firearms intelligence to develop leads, as well as to target and incapacitate the worst trigger pullers in America's communities. And the DEA will conduct investigations to disable criminal organizations who profit from drug trafficking and so often use violence as part of their narcotics trade. But the federal government can't attack this problem alone, and we depend on collaboration with our state and local enforcement partners. And that is why the role here in Detroit played by Chief Craig is so important to this effort. He and his officers have done a great job in the city of Detroit, and we look forward to working with him as we step up our efforts together. And just as we are pleased with both Matthew and Chief Craig being here, we're similarly appreciative of the federal and state law enforcement leaders across the country who will head the operations in each of the 7 cities that I mentioned. Essentially, what this involves is increasing the number of federal agents in these cities around whom we can build additional federal state task forces. And this is our principal tool for addressing violent crime in cities, and it is an effective tool. And then we are going to allocate initially $71 million to help build up the state and local efforts. This could provide an additional 400 police officers nationwide allocated among those 7 cities, as well as help pay the task force officers assigned to our task forces, either pay them or pay their overtime to facilitate the creation of these additional task forces. With that, I'd now like to turn it over to my friend Chris Wray, the director of the FBI. There's I think we all know that there is no finer law enforcement agency in the world than the FBI, and both of us are committed to keeping it that way. And I couldn't be prouder of the job that is being done by the FBI across the board, whether it be in today's arena we're talking about of fighting violent crime, protecting the country against foreign espionage, protecting the marketplace from white-collar criminals. And as I say, I could not be prouder, and I'm very grateful to the leadership being provided by Chris Wray. So, Chris.
Well, good afternoon. I'm proud to represent the FBI and to stand here together with the Attorney General and my colleagues across the Justice Department. As Attorney General Barr noted, our nation has made significant progress against violent crime, but it still plagues far too many of our communities. And those of us in law enforcement cannot rest while any Americans live in fear in their own homes or their own neighborhoods. While every agency you see up here has a different role and responsibility, fighting violent crime is a responsibility that we all share. It's one team and one fight, and Operation Relentless Pursuit reflects that team approach. And the men and women of the FBI are committed to doing our part to help out in that fight. We are striving for that one team, one fight mentality every day in every one of the FBI's field offices, and we're bringing that mentality to the fight against violent crime. We're doing that through our hundreds of task forces throughout the country, including our violent gangs safe streets task forces and our violent crimes task forces, where the FBI and our partners each bring to the table what we do best. We're also doing that by contributing the Bureau's expertise to our collective efforts, working hard to help where we can help the most. The FBI's focus is on targeting the overall leadership of gangs and criminal enterprises that drive violence in American communities. The Bureau has already dedicated resources and strong partnerships to the cities chosen by Operation Relentless Pursuit, and through this initiative, we'll not only be keeping our existing commitment in those cities, but surging additional FBI resources to help further reduce violent crime. We'll do that by reassigning a number of special agents and other personnel to each of these cities to help investigate and take the worst offenders off the streets and cripple their organizations. In today's world, the threats we face are too diverse, too dangerous, and too all-encompassing for any of us to tackle alone. So all of us in law enforcement have to figure out ways to complement each other, to find synergies, to match strengths with strengths, to put together, in effect, our two with our partners' two and have it add up to more than 4, have it equal 5 or 6 or 7. And this initiative is a terrific example of that approach. I am confident that if we continue to work closely together, we're going to continue to make even greater progress against violent crime, progress that I think the American people both expect and deserve. Thank you. And with that, I'll turn it over to Director Don Washington of the Marshal Service.
One team, one fight. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Attorney General Barr, thank you for your steadfast leadership and unwavering support of all the Department of Justice components in our resolve to reduce violent crime and make our communities safer. I am honored to lead the United States Marshal Service, and I stand here today with the leaders of my fellow law enforcement agencies in the U.S. Department of Justice. Today, our common mission is to pursue justice for all by continuing to do the hard work of reducing violent crime and seizing the tools of the trade which allow criminals to ply their daily enterprises in our communities. Attorney General Barr has demonstrated his commitment to combating violent crime by allocating additional resources to the target cities. These resources will help our state and local task force partners who are instrumental to the U.S. Marshal Service's success in locating and apprehending the most dangerous fugitives and criminals. U.S. Marshal task forces around the country routinely pursue the worst of the worst, targeting and bringing to justice fugitives and other criminals who tend to make crime their careers. These persons typically have very clear and sometimes very long histories of violence, and they pose a significant threat to public safety. During Operation Relentless Pursuit, the U.S. Marshal Service will support the Attorney General's initiative through the implementation of targeted enforcement operations. These operations will maximize our impact on violent crime, to provide immediate relief to the involved communities. Of course, we have and we will continue to coordinate our operations with the United States Attorney's Office, the FBI, the DEA, and the ATF. Our role is always about people and the rule of law. In our nation, people should not feel safe. They should actually be safe in their pursuit of life's endeavors. As the nation's first and oldest law enforcement agency, the U.S. Marshal Service will continue our long and very proud tradition of working with our law enforcement partners to protect and serve our communities. Attorney General Barr, thank you for your commitment and your vision in leading this initiative, and thank you for your resolute leadership of the Department of Justice. And now I'd like to turn the podium over to the Acting Administrator of the Drug Enforcement Administration, Dillon.
Thank you, Director Washington. Good afternoon. And thank you, Attorney General Barr, for your outstanding leadership and for being such a good friend to the Drug Enforcement Administration and to law enforcement everywhere. DEA is proud to stand with you and our law enforcement partners in support of this very important initiative. All of our law enforcement partners here today know that drug trafficking and violence are inextricably linked. Drug traffickers employ intimidation and violence to facilitate their deadly trade, and disputes are often settled by acts of violence. Every day in Detroit and in cities all across the country, DEA and our partners are making progress in the fight against drug trafficking and the violent crime associated with it. Significant challenges remain, but we've seen what's possible when we all work together toward a common goal. Each of the federal agencies represented here today has a unique mission and different capabilities, but we are all committed to protecting our communities and enforcing the rule of law. So today, I'm here to affirm DEA's commitment to fighting drug traffickers and violent crime. DEA has long partnered with state and local law enforcement in these cities, but in the coming weeks, DEA pledges to commit additional resources that will enhance our ability to work together and bring the worst offenders to justice. DEA's role in Operation Relentless Pursuit is to target the most violent drug trafficking organizations operating in these locations and put them out of business. We are working with our federal, state, and local partners to expose the connections between violent street gangs and their sources of supply and destroy their drug trafficking networks. Together, with increased resources and resolve, we will implement solutions that will rid our communities of these criminals today and keep them away tomorrow. And now, I would now like to introduce a great friend of mine and of DEA's, Acting Director of ATF, Regina Lombardo.
Thank you. Sir, I'll follow suit and also say thank you for your continued support with my colleagues from the Department of Justice. Matthew Snyder, thank you for your leadership here in Detroit. I'm here today on behalf of all the hardworking men and women of ATF who are absolutely committed and focused on aggressively pursuing reducing firearms violence in our country. We are very proud that our efforts and hard work have definitely contributed to the historic reductions in violence that our nation has realized in recent years. But unfortunately, there are cities and communities which continue to be plagued by a crime of violence. Today, I'm sitting here today with my colleagues to launch Relentless Pursuit. Just recently, we are partnering with Detroit Police Department on many, many cases that we work in partnership. And it's about partnership for the ATF, working with Detroit Police Department on many cases. One of the most recent cases that I think we can highlight is the cases that we work on violent street gangs. The violent street gangs such as Smoke Camp, those are cases that we work to indict criminal violations that are pursuing armed drug trafficking cases, drive-by shootings, homicides. And for us with ATF, we stay very focused on using our crime gun intelligence to tell us exactly where those firearms are coming from and to go after the trigger pullers. That, I believe, was in the south side of the city. In the north side of the city, we're also working with Detroit Police Department on Playboy gangster Crips. 18 members of that have been recently indicted. And that just goes to show the type of cases that we work with ATF in partnership with our state and local and federal partners. So today, we stand here with General Barr leading the department's efforts in partnership with the DEA, the FBI, the U.S. Marshal Service, as well as all of our state and local partners out there. We will concentrate all of our efforts and our resources collectively. As we heard in ECHO, one team, one fight, and the Department of Justice is here to do just that. The foundation of our ATF's strategy is to use every available tool to identify, investigate, and support prosecutions that go after firearm offenders, exploiting all of our resources, all of our crime gun intelligence, our crime gun enforcement teams, our firearms tracing capabilities, which is very unique, as well as our integrated ballistic NIBIN we've heard often talk about. Using all of those tools, and also for us, is going after the source of those weapons that are being provided to these gangs and to these criminal organizations, going after the straw purchasers that put those firearms in the hand of those gang members. We were redirecting a lot of our resources with special agents, investigators, as well as our canines as well, because they are the ones that go out and look for the shell casings and firearms, redeploying all of our resources toward this initiative. So we stand ready to, what I call, relentlessly drive the department's initiative to mission success. And I look forward to working 2020 with our partners to ensure that these communities achieve reductions in firearms and other violent crimes that we have achieved in other places across the nation. And now I'd like to have the honor of introducing Chief Craig. I feel like you're no better partner to ATF, so thank you for your partnership.
Very much.
True partner.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Like all, I want to start off by thanking Attorney General Barr for really showing leadership in this fight. But also, I appreciate the accolades for what we've been doing, at least during my administration over the last almost 7 years. My partner, Matthew, I appreciate you and what you do, and certainly the other leaders of the federal agencies who we work with each and every day. Simply said, collaborations between local and federal law enforcement work. I've had tremendous experience in this arena, and I'm going to talk briefly about my time in LAPD, which I know the local reporters know. But when I was an LAPD captain working in South LA, a location where it was certainly lots of violence, violent gangs, I remember vividly when an offer was made. And we worked very closely with our federal partners, primarily the FBI, and one of the most violent gangs in the city of LA. That was a long body of work. It culminated with the execution of 25 search warrants. I will tell you, it was that effort, that collaborative effort, that made the difference in this very small footprint in Los Angeles. And to this day, that community has changed. That's the kind of sustained work and how collaborations work. Here in Detroit, since 2014, understanding the importance of these relationships, we were working very aggressively, supportively with our federal partners. So by example, we focus on the most violent street gangs. And as it has already been indicated, ATF, FBI, our marshals, we focus on these gangs, resulting in 107 indictments since 2014. And yes, it did make a difference. So we have seen a steady decline here in the city of Detroit. Between 2014 and 2018, we saw double-digit reductions in all of our violence. In fact, overall violence, we're down 14%. 14%. And so the work continues. But I'm not going to sit here and wave a flag of success. We know there's still much work to do. I had a chance today going through some letters from some high school students. And it's ironic that this is the day that we're talking about this new enhanced effort, this collaborative effort. And in the letters, many of the students cited the chief, violence still continues. We know that you and the Detroit Police Department have done a wonderful job in reducing a lot of the violence that existed before you got here. But we believe it's still too much. And so I think about those young people who are growing up in this city, who are the future leaders of the city of Detroit. We must do better, and we will do better. So I'm thank you for this enhanced collaborative effort. I know that 2020 is going to be a great year, and we're going to continue to drive crime down. So again, to my federal partners, I just simply want to say again, thank you.
Again, thank you. We've got some time to open it up for questions.
Mr. Attorney General, can you talk a little bit about what the undercurrent is, or what joins all of the violent crimes in all of these 7 cities, and explain why here and why now?
Each city is really different. There are different drivers for violent crime depending on the circumstances. Sometimes it's large nationally related gangs. Sometimes it's more connected to drug trafficking. Sometimes it's opportunistic neighborhood gangs. Why here and why now? Fighting violent crime is one of the primary priorities of this administration. And as I mentioned, it had gone up a little bit in the last couple of years of the preceding administration, but we've been able to push it down for the first few years of this administration. But in a number of cities, it's a stubborn problem. As the chief just mentioned, there's been consistent progress here in Detroit in recent years, but you're starting from a very high level of violent crime, and it's still significantly higher than the national average. And our view is that we go where justice is needed most. It's intolerable for some Americans to experience high levels of violence, and others live in relative peace. So we go where the trouble is. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Mr. Attorney General, you said that there was a lot of an explosion of anti-police rhetoric, police officers being shot. Do you think that there's just too much anti-rhetoric in the country for the respect of law and law enforcement these days?
Absolutely. I think that, and are you referring to something I said or my editorial?
Your editorial.
Oh. Yeah, I feel there is too much anti-law enforcement rhetoric, or not sufficient respect for police officers and law enforcement officers and the job they do, or at least recognition of it. And to me, it's the toughest job in the country, and it takes a toll. And it involves a great deal of sacrifice. And I've said a number of times that, after the Vietnam War and the way we treated our troops that fought in that war, we learned a lesson, and we learned that they deserve our respect for the sacrifices they make. But when we stop and look at, the threats we face here at home from violent crime, we owe the same kind of respect and appreciation to our police officers. And I've pointed out that in a full employment economy like we have, and given the toughness of the job, it's getting harder and harder to find people of character who are willing to take these jobs. And there are a lot of vacancies around the country. So I'd like to see increased recognition among the American people of those who serve.
General Barr, just last week in Detroit, there was an internal report that alleged systemic misconduct and abuse by officers in the department's narcotics unit. Meanwhile, under the Trump administration, the Justice Department has largely abandoned the practice of investigating pattern and practice abuses by local police forces. I'm wondering if you see a need to tackle these kinds of allegations of misconduct while also providing support to local forces through programs like this.
Yeah, well, the fact that we do support the forces and we are interested in maximizing our collaboration with them on fighting crime doesn't mean we abdicate our responsibility to enforce civil rights, and where credible information is brought to our attention, we do investigate it.
If I could follow up with something off topic as well, we've seen a handful of Republican senators say in recent days that suggesting the FISA Court may need to be shut down unless there's large-scale reform done. I'm wondering if you think the changes that the FBI has outlined in the wake of the IG report go far enough, and what you think it would mean to lose the FISA Court.
I think FISA is a critical tool to protecting Americans, and I know the director and I feel very strongly about that. And we're both, we take the findings of the Inspector General very seriously, and we are working hand in hand to adopt reforms and change procedures and so forth that will address the issues. And I have to say that I greatly appreciate Director Wray's leadership on this, because he didn't wait around for the IG report. He was working on these issues for quite a while and have put together a long list of steps that I think do address the problems found in the IG report. And we're going to be sitting down, evaluating them together. And if there's some additional things to add, we won't hesitate to do that. But we are committed to preserving FISA, and we think all Americans should be committed to preserving FISA. It is essential to protect the security of the United States.
How much of the $71 million and the 400 additional officers will be coming to Detroit?
We don't have a specific figure on that. Part of that, each city is going to work together in their cities among the different components and local law enforcement to see how quickly we can get things up and running, and they can absorb these funds. But the funds are essentially available starting right now, and you know, I would expect a relatively even disbursement of those funds among these 7 cities.
I'd like to ask Director Wray a question, if I could. With regard to the IG report, the former director of the FBI, James Comey, dismissed the findings as just sloppiness on the part of FBI agents, and he sort of suggested it was low-level agents. Do you agree with that, or, you know, in hindsight now, a couple days into it, do you think it was more than that?
Okay.
Well, as I said when the report first came out, the report, in my view, describes behavior and performance that I consider unacceptable and also unrepresentative of who we are as an institution. And that's why I've put in place and ordered these 40-plus reforms, which are serious steps which go above and beyond even what the Inspector General recommended. Having said all that, we've provided a lot of information on that topic and answered a lot of questions about it last week. And I think all of us here today, gathered the way we are, as the Attorney General said, under his leadership, I think this is unprecedented to have all of us gathered this way in one place at one time outside of D.C. And that by itself is a story, because the violent crime epidemic that exists in many cities around this country impacts millions of Americans every day. And the level of federal, state, and local law enforcement cooperation targeting that threat is a story that I hope many of you will cover, given the impact that it has on households all over this country. So, thanks.
Okay, last question.
Michigan recently legalized recreational marijuana, which of course remains illegal under federal law. With additional federal agents in the city, would they enforce the federal law or defer to state law when they come across them?
Was that a question about enforcing federal marijuana laws? DEA has always enforced federal marijuana laws and will continue to enforce federal marijuana laws. We attack drug trafficking organizations, large-scale drug trafficking organizations, and when they engage in marijuana drug trafficking, we aggressively attack them as any other drug trafficking organization.